Welcome back to Inside Nashville, where our guest today is Tim Dubois. Just in the break, we're talking about a lot of different things from our last segment, but one of the things that's obviously clear, and everyone who's preceded you on our show here has talked about the many challenges that are facing the music industry. I know in your work at Vanderbilt, at the Owen School, you spent a lot of time thinking about that, right. looking at that, and talking about that, I guess, in a holistic kind of way. What would you describe are some of the tipping points that occurred that kind of brought us to this place? And now that we find ourselves at this place, are you seeing some opportunities? What do you see as our next steps in the short term?
Well, I think obviously one of the main tipping points was Napster in 2000, and I still remember, as you probably remember, we used to have to go once a quarter to New York, and we had label head meetings, as they call them, and I still remember the day. I was sitting in the room with all the BMG label heads, including Joe, and some engineer from MIT coming out and telling us about Napster and what it was, and you know, I had heard a little bit about it before that, but I really didn't understand what it was. And to be real honest, it just really went right over my head.
So it wasn't like this moment of everyone going, "Oh my goodness,
well,
this is..."
Yeah, it was kind of shocking
right.
when you try to, well, you mean the guy can just go into my computer and get my songs that I paid for and take them, and he didn't have to pay for them? But I have to admit my naive nature was, well, hey, there's millions of dollars at risk here, and we've got all these smart people. We have, at that point in time, had a Harvard MBA.
Right.
Strauss Zelnick is running our company, and we had Kevin Conroy and all these MIT engineers, and I just thought, well, they've got to figure this out. They're gonna figure it out, and they're gonna fix this. They're gonna put that genie back in the bottle. And as we all know, I was wrong.
Unfortunately.
It just got worse and worse. If you look at the industry, one of the things we do in the classes, we talk about this, and I show them the list of in the class at Vanderbilt while we talk about. I have several graphs that show we were growing so nicely up through year 2000, and then the industry just starts to go down. In fact, there was only 1 year, 2004, that it took a little uptick, and then the rest of it was all downhill. And it can pretty much be traced back to the advent of Napster. That's when it turned. But there were also, if you'll remember, several other things that were going on that fed the process. We were having major consolidation at retail.
Right.
We had all the big box retailers that came in, and they used music as to drive traffic rather than try to make profit off of it, which devalued the value of the music. The Telecommunications Act was another thing that really caused tremendous problems for the industry as a whole. When you started to be able to put groups of stations together in cities, and they became able to do a lot of market research, it ended up shooting the record labels in the foot, because all of a sudden they were overanalyzing everything that they played. They tried to divide the city up into certain demographics, and we were lucky enough to get the 35 plus female. Lucky enough because 35 females are not, that's a nice demographic, but they don't buy a lot of music. And so and they like familiarity. That's the other thing that happened when we stop and think about it. If you can look right back 2 years after the Telecommunications Act, playlists came down because their research showed them that their demo that they were going after wanted familiarity. Well, familiarity meant they played records longer, and that was not good for you and me. So all those things played into it. There was a basic flaw, big flaw in the record company model to begin with, in that we were the venture capitalists that were driving it. We were putting up the money to develop the artists, but we only got one little piece of the pie, and that was the record sales. We were building this great big brand with our dollars and our marketing expertise, but yet the only way we made money was off the sale of records. That was a disaster for us in the end, because as those records went away, we had no other piece of the career. Of course, now we're evolving into a situation where record labels insist on more of a piece of way to get
the 360 deal.
A 360 deal. But it was not something that happened from one thing. It wasn't all about Napster. It was just a lot of things. And it was a system that was very, very wasteful in a lot of ways. You stop and think about it, as I like to say, I enjoyed my time at the trough. It was really a wonderful time. I made a ton of money, and we had expense accounts that just allowed us to live like kings. And that's not so much that way anymore.
No.
You know, it's really gotten a lot more realistic as we go forward. We started cutting fat in the early 2000s, and then we got down to the meat.
Some companies decided just to cut their record
That's
companies
right.
out
Some just decided not to do it.
Be out of the business.
That's right. That's right. But you know, on the other side of that,
tell us, are there things that you're optimistic about, or are you seeing opportunities, or do you see this as a deconstruction and a decline that's going to continue for years into the future?
Well, I don't think we're finished. I think, and again, if you saw mid-year numbers this year, Adele last year kind of lifted the whole market a little bit, but then again this year you're starting to see it slide again. We don't have an Adele out there right now that's driving so much a high percentage of the business. I think there's a ways to go, and it doesn't get better real fast. I don't think it ever goes back like it was, and I think it's a waste of time to sit around and say, why can't it go back like it was? Because it's just not. We live in a different world right now. One of the things I think people miss completely is when you go back, when you're as old as I am, you go back to that situation where there were about 3 or 4 entertainment options. Mm-hmm. You know, you could watch, when I was a kid, you could watch 1 of 3 television stations, you could listen to AM radio, or you could ride your bike. That was pretty much it. And then all of a sudden we live in this world where we just have this wild smorgasbord of choices for the use of our time and the use of our money, and music is just not as important in the overall spectrum as it has been, and I don't think it ever will be again. I think the good things that have happened as a result of where we've gotten to over the last 12 years, the rise of the internet and the ability of artists to market themselves is a really positive thing for the independent artists. They can accomplish a whole lot more than they ever could before because they have a very cost-effective way to build their fan base and then to stay in touch with those fans. The lessening of the importance of physical distribution is also a really, really important thing for those artists. You know, it didn't make any difference if you had a great piece of music if you couldn't get it in Walmart. And that's why we had majors that dominated all that stuff. So all of that stuff has changed. There's a downside to that in that it is so easy now for someone to do an album and to get it out there that we have this high noise level, a whole lot of mediocrity in the system. So my joke is all it takes now is 4 guys, a 3-day weekend, 2 kegs of beer, and 1 Apple computer, and you got yourself an album.
A band. Grammy New Artist of the Year.
So.
Well, and what's interesting about all that, though, is I would say for the segment that's living here in Nashville and for a country label like you ran, even though all this new technology is here, even though what you talked about, this kind of the DIY, the do-it-yourself approach for the new bands, at least in Nashville, since radio is still, terrestrial radio specifically, is still so powerful, there's still that need for the strong promotion team.
Absolutely.
Which is still being delivered by the record company. So
yeah, if you want to hear yourself on the radio, and if you want to play in front of a stadium full of people, then there's really not any way to do it other than with a major label. And it's not about, people get confused about the fact they think, well, it's about the money. Well, it's not about the money. It's about the connections and the leverage. I learned that when Tony and I had Universal South. We had piles of money. We were as well financed as any label had been in town, but we had no superstars to leverage our younger acts with. You know, it's hard to get Joe Nichols heavy rotations when all you've got to offer is Joe Nichols backstage passes. Where the guy that's coming in right behind me, he says, hey, you know, I need to go to heavy this week on one of his new acts on RCA. And oh, by the way, do you have your Kenny Chesney tickets yet?
Right.
And he's got that leverage that doesn't have anything to do with money, that money
the
can't buy.
value.
It's the
It's the
value
value.
of the other artists.
And what you're talking about is really brand development, and that was a reference back to the record company as the investor is really the one that begins that whole brand investment, but doesn't share in that. So real quickly, we're talking about near term here. What do you see out 3 to 5 years from now?
Well, I think we're stabilizing a little bit as an industry. I don't think we're falling off the face of the cliff like we were 4 or 5 years ago. You know, I don't think, in fact, one of my former students, Glenn Peoples, just wrote an article in Billboard this week talking about the demise of the major labels was probably people talking about that was a little premature. You know, they're going to be here. They've had to change. They've had to slim down. They've changed the way they do business. I think they're going to stay pretty much like they are. I think that the independent artists you know, will continue to grow and continue to be important. You know, you have success stories like the Civil Wars and bands like that that basically did it without a big label and get to a fine level of success. Don't see any really big changes. I think the biggest change is we are moving from an ownership model more to an access model. People don't care. I have an 18-year-old daughter, and she doesn't care anything at all about having anything physical. And in fact, she doesn't care about owning it as long as she can play it when she wants to. And that's what Spotify does. Another really important change over the last 3 or 4 years is the use of YouTube by these kids. If you go in and mention in a group of high school kids, if you mention an act or a song, the very first place they go to is YouTube.
Right.
It has become their search engine for music, and that's a big change.
Thank you, Tim. This has been really good, and it's always interesting to hear the right side of your brain talking and the left side of your brain talking. You're one of the few people that I know that can bring those things together, and we appreciate you sharing your time and your wisdom with us today. Thank you very much.
Before he quits running the camera, this guy taught me most of what I know when you get right down to it. I was sitting there. He gave me Foster and Lloyd as an act. 1 week later, we had a #1 record. I rest my case.
I just liked you. I just liked you. I had access. It was my Kitty Chesney pass to your Joe Nichols. Well, thank you for watching Inside Nashville this week, where our guest has been Tim Dubois. It's been delightful. Thank you for being here. Join us again soon. Thank you.